Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Polson, Executive Director of the Jewish Heritage Fund for Excellence and a member of the Greater Louisville Project Policy Board. I believe the report that's being released today on the effects of family and generational poverty will prove to be one of the most consequential reports the Greater Louisville Project has released to date. When you start to shine a light on the core issues that are holding our families and children back from living their full potential, we're compelled to take action. At GLP, we've already started to see that happen with our 2015 report that focused on multidimensional poverty. Over 5,000 reports were requested and delivered throughout the community. Over 24 media stories have included information from the report. We also had a number of local organizations reach out to request further segmentation of the data to help them understand how they could better serve their clients. People are talking about these issues and the work of the Greater Louisville Project. Our singular focus is to provide research and data that catalyze civic action. We don't advocate for particular initiatives. We simply seek to provide independent data on some of our most pressing needs. By using that data to engage community leaders in conversations, we hope to create a more competitive city that benefits our entire community. And action is what is required of us. This report illustrates that Louisville is making progress. Our ranking amongst our peer cities has improved, but it hasn't improved enough. It's up to all of us to use this data to bring about changes. I can tell you that we're having different conversations today at our organization than we were just a few years ago. Because of the work that is being highlighted in this year's report and the one from 2015, we're trying to figure out how to focus more of our resources on the social determinants of health, while also continuing to invest in solutions that require action today. These are complex issues and they require thoughtful solutions. The data in this report is compelling. Given my organization's focus on health, I'm drawn to those statistics. Approximately 44% of children in poverty live in households that experience food insecurity, compared to 17% of children out of poverty. In Louisville, families in poverty are more likely to live in areas with poor air quality, which leads to heightened rates of asthma and missed school days for students. For many in this room and in our community, this is not surprising, nor is it new. Many of you work for organizations that are on the front line every day dealing with the effects of generational poverty. You see the challenges these kids and their families face. Oftentimes, they're the same challenges their parents face, and you knew them too. Some in this room know this data at a personal level. I do. I grew up in Southern Kentucky, where generational poverty is the norm, not the exception. When it comes to a living wage, many of the effects of working in a tobacco field or a shirt factory or a low-wage part-time job in the urban core are the same regardless of the geography. I believe that I have a responsibility to use this information to help accelerate the work that's already being done and to find new ways to further eliminate barriers that are keeping our kids from succeeding. One of the ways we're doing that at the Heritage Fund is to use the GLP as a screening tool in our grants process. By asking partners to show how their program or idea can change the data that's reported by GLP, we're all getting on the same platform. These reports are helping us to start talking in a common language. My long-term hope is that these reports help our community to focus on common outcomes that lead to sustained change. I'm now pleased to introduce the man behind the curtain, who, with his amazing team, makes all this possible. Ben?
Thanks, Jeff. I think it says something kind of amazing about our community that we have an oversold, packed house to talk about data. And I think that really speaks to the timeliness of what we are doing and the collective work of the people in this room. We all understand on an individual level the needs that exist in our community. But what we are trying to do, and what this report from the Greater Louisville Project hopes to do, is help us to put those individual needs in a context that enables us to take effective action. So I'm going to say two important things And then we're going to talk a little bit about the intended impact of the report. Going to talk a little bit, very briefly, about context. Going to do a little bit of nerdiness. And then we're going to hand over to let some of our community partners talk about the awesomeness that they are doing. So the two important things. If we are going to reach the top tier of our peer cities, we need to create a community and an economy that enables all people to reach their full potential. In order for people to reach that potential, we need to remove the barriers, the complicated interlocking barriers that impede them not individually, but as those barriers are experienced collectively across multiple dimensions. And we need those interventions to not just be focused on an individual person, but on the household and neighborhood context in which that person lives. Those are the two important things. At the Greater Louisville Project, our purpose is to provide research and data that catalyzes civic action. The action we hope for out of this report is clear. We create the infrastructure as a community so that any place a person shows up in need, we not only meet that individual need, but we connect them through a warm handoff to the resources that meet the rest of their needs, that wrap around them in a way that enables them to reach their full potential. To make that hope a reality, we have to have a clear vision in which we articulate that is our goal as a community. We have to make a transformational investment in the technology and resources to make that happen. And we have to have the will to reallocate the existing resources that we have to leverage the infrastructure and the organizations that exist across silos, so that we don't just talk about education in terms of education, in terms of achievement. We talk about education as part of one's health story. And we don't just talk about health as this is what happens when you go to get treatment. We talk about health as engaging the social influencers of health, of which education is an essential part. And we need to talk as a social services community not about just the efficiency of our individual operations or our effectiveness, but how we play a broader part in building the ecosystem that this community is going to need to break the cycle of generational poverty. And that is what we hope we can begin to accomplish with the conversations that will come from this data and this report. And the return on that investment is clear. Economically, the research that we highlight here indicates that our community could unlock a minimum of $200 million per year in untapped economic potential. And from a human perspective, removing the crushing burden of chronic stress, exclusion, and instability on a household can enable that household to break the cycle of generational poverty. That could launch us into the top tier of our peer cities, not just in one of our deep drivers, but across the deep drivers. Because let's be clear, that is a big part of what is holding us back. For the Greater Louisville Project, this work is a natural extension of the work that we have been doing for the last 15 years. GLP is funded by a consortium of foundations to serve as our community's critical friend. We are the public policy person that tells you you've got something in your teeth. And we use research and data to engage civic leaders across the spectrum, nonprofit, philanthropic, business, in the kinds of dialogue and engagement that will enable and drive action. The deep drivers that the Greater Louisville Project started with were identified by the Brookings Institute as these are the things that will define a competitive city going into the future. Jobs, education, quality of place. Recently, we added health into that mix because we recognize that underlying each of those is the health of individuals and communities. And over our history, we have a number of times identified data that calls us as a community to act. The education pipeline identified that an unacceptable number of our young people were dropping out of the education system before they had achieved their full potential and before they were reaching their capacity to the tools that they needed to contribute economically and socially to our community. And that led to all sorts of action and continues to reverberate through 55,000 Degrees and the Louisville Promise and other educational activities. In our health report, we identified that there was a 12-year life expectancy gap between neighborhoods only a few miles apart in our community. And we looked deeply at the underlying causes of that gap that transcended the things that we traditionally think of as health and included social influencers, environmental concerns, behavioral health. And in our neighborhoods report last year, we identified that 1 in 7 Louisvillians live in a neighborhood of concentrated poverty, and that geographic separation defined far more of an individual and a child's life than it should. In each case, the data that we presented helped philanthropy, social service organizations, businesses to act on that. And that's our hope. That the data that we present here will help this community to act in a way that enables each person in our community to reach their full potential. On to the nerdiness. So, on the chairs here and available on our website, we have any number of data available to talk about how poverty is experienced in our community. I won't walk through all of it, but I will say a few things. One, it is shocking that 1 in 5 children growing up in Louisville grow up in a household in income poverty. It is powerful that 67% of those households have at least one person who is working, but who does not earn enough through their job to break that household out of poverty. And that is a narrative that is not one we often tell. And the barriers that stop those households from escaping poverty are not singular. They are complex, multifaceted, and they stack on top of one another in a way that makes it very difficult, even when you meet that one need, for that household to escape. So I won't go through all the pieces of this. I will say that as we have been previewing this report in different parts of the community, the striking thing has been the different striking things. People will say, oh my gosh, 20-something% of young people in poverty moved in the course of a single year. 20%, I remember how disruptive it was that one year that I moved twice. What that did to my relationships at school, what that did to my grades, I remember that personally. And someone else says, I remember what it was to not eat over the weekend, and what that meant for me walking in the door on Monday. And another person says, I remember that every single person in my family smoked, and what that meant for my ability to be an athlete. And I remember that when I had to take the bus to work, and what that meant for the jobs that I could get. This is a timely report in our community because there are already so many organizations working on this and so much momentum. When you look at some of the media coverage that we've had recently, the recent profile in Business First about bringing people off the sidelines, the recent piece in FPL about the bus system, about the way our neighborhoods are structured, you can see that we are hungry for something different. And when you look at what is already happening, the pilots being run out of the Louisville Health Advisory Board about how do we do a survey of every person that comes into the family health centers in our community. when you look at the work being done in the education community around how do we highlight all the places along the way that a young person falls off track, and not just intervening in the school, but bringing to bear the full resources of our community. And you look at the way that we are talking about sharing data across our health system in new ways that enable new resources, we're ready. We're ready. So what we hope is that you will use this report, stick it on your wall, figure the places where you fit in. Jeff actually, when we first showed him the report, he said, all this stuff is really interesting, I get it, makes sense, we're gonna use this. The most interesting piece to me is here. It's that center circle that unites those needs and those people. Recognizing that these are individual stories, these are the stories of households, and that if we are going to effectively change the trajectory for our community as a whole, and for these individual children and the households in which they live, we have to live in that center. Across these deep drivers, across these silos, across these needs, and that is not going to be easy. But I firmly and fundamentally believe that we can. So at this time, I would like to welcome to the stage one of the voices for that kind of intervention in our community, our mayor.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Ben. This room is always packed when the annual report comes out from GLP, so that means we got a lot of people paying attention in this community, which I really, really appreciate. And I want to thank everybody from the Greater Louisville Project that's worked on this edition and every year's edition as well. Stephen Riley, thank you for your leadership. James Graham Brown Foundation, Mason's in the back, thank you so much. Jeff Polson and the Jewish Heritage Fund, thank you all for what you're doing to make all this come to life, and the many local foundations that have worked together to support GLP. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing locally, but I really want to spend most of our time on kind of a core national problem we have. This report could have St. Louis on it, Kansas City on it, Oakland on it, Newark on it, Miami on it. That's a problem. We have challenges in our community, like every community around the country. So that doesn't mean that we're not going to do anything, but it calls for action not just locally, but at the state level and at the federal level as well. I know a lot of people in this room, and I know a lot of people in this room have big hearts, and when they read reports like this, it makes them cry. And I know that when you interact with some of the kids that we interact, especially the kids in our community, it makes you feel frustrated. You feel good that you're trying to do something, but there seems to be so many societal pressures and forces coming down on people, resisting their ability to move forward. I want to talk about a few of those today. We know that we cannot be a great city when reports like this are issued. We know we can't be a great country when reports like this are issued. We know that when you have 2/3 of households in poverty, including at least one person who works, how can you have any kind of sustainable economic system or a city that way? There has not been a change in the federal minimum wage since 2009. And the federal minimum wage is not a living wage to start with. So these are questions we need to be asking ourselves as Americans, as Kentuckians. We are preempted. When we tried to change our minimum wage here in Louisville, the Frankfurt state government preempted us from doing that. So that's a question that we have to ask about our state as well. But what does encourage me from time to time is these systems and these results that we see are man-made. So man can unmake them. Probably going to be woman that's going to unmake them, truth be told. But I want to apologize on behalf of all males. But when you think about this, Nelson Mandela once said that poverty is, quote, man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. And overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity, it's an act of justice. And that's absolutely true. And because especially, as Ben was just saying, as we know, too many Louisville neighborhoods struggle with concentrated poverty, and they are a result of a system. And I would say these were targeted, institutionalized, racist practices that were designed to make sure that there was wealth disparity in our country. And you know what? Those systems did a really good job when you take a look at what has taken place. There were official government policies that destroyed many families' opportunities to create generational wealth that they could pass down to their children. The most noticeable is redlining, where we're not far from a red line district. We might be in a red line district back in the day in Louisville, and if you were in that red line district, your ability to get a mortgage to buy a home was non-existent. And guess what the skin color was of the people within that red line district? It wasn't this. So most people build their family wealth through home ownership. Average white family has 10 times the net worth of the average black family today, and most of that wealth comes from a home. And isn't that sad that these were institutionalized government policies that have led to that? So that's just a matter of fact in history that we don't teach in our schools, which is shameful, because people don't understand the lingering impact of these issues, whether it's Jim Crow, whether it's the day law, whether it's redlining, whether it's urban renewal, and how those issues are still with us here today and continue to impact us. It's important that people know. So when we talk about the lingering effect of injustice, we see the historical roots. It's not a human failing. Everybody has tremendous potential. It's a result of systems that have been put in place. So overcoming poverty for our city is about justice, but it's also about potential. You all have heard me say many times before, we define our city value of compassion as respecting each and every one of our citizens so that their full human potential is shining and thriving. And that's critical for all of us because of the way that we're interconnected and we're locked together as one people. The report rightly shows that we could have an additional $200 million of economic growth if we just raised people up to basic levels. That's good for everybody. I reject this notion of win-lose that you hear in some political circles, where opponents will paint people that don't look like them, that if they win, we lose. That is absolutely incorrect. If they win, we all lose. This is not about division. This is about unification and pulling people together. And for our city, this is one of the greatest times in our city's history to pull this work together. We're going through a tremendous renaissance here in Louisville. We have $13 billion of investment taking place in our city right now. Almost $1 billion of that is happening west of 9th Street. So we've never had this type of investment that's taking place in our city, that's going to continue to take place in our city. We're going through a tourism creation and boom like we haven't seen before, that's creating all types of jobs. Unemployment is at 3.2% in our city right now. When West Louisville goes through its $1 billion of investment, we must be intentional, and we are in the planning stages, that the wealth that is coming into this community creates jobs in this community, creates more home ownership of the people that live in this community, that creates more business ownership of people that live in this community, so that we can show the rest of the country what a model city can do. Because the country is crying for solutions to this very problem that plague our country right now. So our job is to make sure that this prosperity reaches every neighborhood. And we have a large amount of tactical solutions that we're aiming, and I call them tactical because they're not ultimately systems change. The generational change, Ben referred to that with our Louisville Promise, or our cradle to career approach toward education, where we're wanting to amplify the resources for the whole child, not just the classroom child, the social and emotional child, the physical and mental health of the child, so that under-resourced kids are not showing up 3 years behind advantaged kids in kindergarten. How do you close a gap like that at the age of 6? That investment should be going to kids at the very beginning and not after the fact. We have neighborhood place services that are helping people when they're down and out. our workforce development systems, whether it's here at the Urban League or with Kentuckiana Work, are all about building skills so people can have a living wage type of job. I call these tactical because, folks, what I don't want us to forget is that these systems are designed by people, they can be unmade by people, and there are countries in this planet Earth that have systems where the wealth disparity is not nearly what it is, like it is here in the United States of America. There are countries on the planet Earth, in Western Europe and Scandinavia, where there is literally no poverty. And I would encourage you to visit these countries if you haven't been before. It is amazing to visit a country where there is no poverty. You don't realize the type of grind that it puts on everybody, especially people in poverty day in and day out, when it is alleviated from a country where everybody has health care, everybody has housing, everybody has food security, everybody has child care, everybody has education through college as part of the structure of a country. The question always comes up, can we afford it? I think the question is, can we not afford it? Because what we see in our country right now in terms of disparity, in terms of poverty, in terms of pain, in terms of crime, is a result of this massive disparity in wealth that we have with people. And you throw on top of that 320 million guns on the streets of America, you have the United States of America today. So when people say, we are the richest country, and they puff their chest out, I would suggest it is time that we redefine what rich means and what wealth means. Wealth does not mean 1 in 7 children in our country living in poverty. Wealth means we have all the basic needs of our citizens taken care of, so in fact their full human potential can shine. I bring this up because so many Americans think the system we have is what we have, and we can't do better. We have to reject this notion of American exceptionalism that we cannot learn from other countries. And we have more than enough money to take care of all our problems. It's just a question of, do we have the will as a country to apportion our resources that way? We spend 18% of our country's GDP on health care. The next country that has universal health care spends 11%, and they cover everybody, and they have better health outcomes. So there's 7% of GDP that in effect is waste right there. So we could solve all of these issues if we just had the will to do that. And that comes from us. Pressure on your state representatives, certainly pressure on your federal representatives to say we need breakthrough change, we need innovation, we need innovative change. And then, you know what, folks, that's going to be good for everybody. Okay, this isn't about some grand socialist experiment. There are countries that have proven that you can have a healthy social safety net and large degrees of innovation as well. Germany, Sweden, Norway, they are doing it. And yes, we are more diverse. That's no reason not to do it. We can show the world how a highly diverse, highly pluralistic country embraces that as a source of creativity for a bigger economy and provides these basic needs that people deserve day in and day out. So that's a little system call for systems change. I just don't want us to think, well, we're doing this tactical stuff. And our city has as many tactical solutions in place as any other city out there. They're important, and we have to do those today because we are fighting for justice today for each and every one of our kids. But we also have to think systems-wide, think strategy-wide on the state and federal level where we can have massive change for the sake of our country's future. For today, if you want to do your part, help us with our Summer Works program. We've grown that from 200 kids the first year to 5,200 last year. So you can hire a youth for the summer. $2,500, and they work for you. It's usually these kids' first paycheck. Give them the taste of what that's like. It changes kids' lives. Please help us with that. Mentor through our Reimage program. We now have had 400 justice-involved youth go through our Reimage program, ages 16 to 24. Only 5% of those kids have recidivated. Okay, these programs work if they're funded and if loving adults are involved. So, we need your help. These guys are telling me to quit talking up here. I am not quite done preaching, but I will go ahead and step off the stage. But cities are where the solutions will be coming from.
Good afternoon. I'm Lori Flannery. I'm President and CEO of New Directions. and I very much appreciate being invited here today. I think I'm a little taste of what the mayor was talking about as far as tactical applications. So the policy part is obviously very important, but New Directions has been around for a long time. We do a lot of different things. We're a community development corporation, and so by nature we really try to respond to whatever community we are in. One of the core things that we do is affordable housing, and so our actual legal name is New Directions Housing Corporation. I shorten it to New Directions because we do so many different things, but that is how we started with a multifamily project, Jackson Woods, that some of you all may have been familiar with or maybe are now. One of the things that is important to us is we talk about that we are really for the whole community. I will say, however, that over time it seems, at least from the rental portfolio piece of it, that we really have an identity that is associated with West Louisville. So of the 1,040 rental households that we have in our portfolio right now, 80% of those are located in West Louisville neighborhoods. That means over 800 families are people who are in our trust and care from a rental housing standpoint. And so as I was looking at the report, because of course we got a little bit of a sneak peek, and looking at some of the information in there, I realized that the 70 other people that work at New Directions would not be surprised, really, I don't think, by a single thing that is in that report. But it is comforting to see that the data is validated and that it is put in such a way that other people can talk about it. One of the things that whenever we show people reports like this, some of the first things they say are, $11,000 a year, how in the world can a household, exist on $11,000 a year? We had just actually gone through this experience of looking at our own portfolio ourselves last fall, because we have a lot of new board members who really are not in our sector, and they were interested in knowing, who is it that we're serving? What do these people, what are the demographics? We came up with $10,500 annually. We don't have an average person who is in our rental portfolio because we have some senior properties, we have babies all the way down to firstborn. But if you were going to look at our typical household, examples of this are more than any other example of a family, you would be looking at a single African-American female, 23 years of age, with 2 or 3 children, making $10,500 a year. And that's the population that we serve. So it's great for us because this report shows, it's something that we can show people. One of the reasons I think it's important is when you look at yourself, instead of just looking at national data, I think when you look at Louisville, that really resonates with people. We are comparing ourselves with current information. We are looking at our peers, and there is a rational choice in how those peers are selected. All of those things I think are very important and why the Greater Louisville Project resonates so much. In addition to that, we all get into our sectors, so sometimes the housing people don't know what the health people are talking about, and you have all these acronyms. These reports really distill down to the average person level, no matter what your profession or whatever business you're in, exactly what we're talking about. And Ben was saying, put this on your wall. I actually have a folder where I have multiple years. I finally took out the Beyond Merger one because it was too thick. But we really use these. When we have board members who are interested in what's going on, people who want to join our board, we have potential donors or people who are volunteers. Anyway, we use the information a lot. One of the things I wanted to show as an example of how we are living and are deeply aligned with this approach is our partnerships. So we open up everything we do at New Directions to the entire neighborhood. We have 4 learning centers for after school. The entire neighborhood is invited. We have St. Benedict's Early Childhood Education Center in the California neighborhood. The entire neighborhood is invited. We partner with River City Housing. We are rehabbing Shelby Park abandoned homes with them. We partner with the Housing Partnership. We are creating what's called the CDFI. We partner with Wellspring. And those are people who help those who are facing the challenge of mental illness. And one of my favorite partnerships is a partnership we have with Choosewell, which helps mothers who have overcome addiction and are reuniting with their families. New Directions provides housing, Choosewell tries to fill all those other gaps, and those children oftentimes go to St. Benedict's Early Childhood Education Center. Partnerships are the key, and thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Am I good here? I'm not great at lining up microphones. My name is Patricia Lovett. I'm a team leader for family learning at the National Center for Families Learning, and I'm very excited to share a little bit about our work nationally and locally with you today. At the National Center for Families Learning, we work to eradicate poverty through education solutions for families. This is a bold mission, and we really hope to put ourselves out of work one day. For nearly 30 years, we've had the opportunity to engage partners across the country through laboratories of learning to bring two-generation solutions to families in over 100 communities, impacting over 1 million families as they raise their literacy levels and build pathways to self-sustainability. And we are very excited that through the opportunity to work with those partners, learn from them, and refine our approach, we are now bringing that work to Louisville in the deepest way that we have anywhere in the country. A couple of years ago, we had 2 demonstration sites in Louisville. Today, because of a collective impact approach with many of our partners in the room here who support our work and our partners in the local community, we are currently working in 10 locations, including here at Urban League, where we're so happy to be engaged. And I'd like to take a little bit of time to tell you about, I know it's a little bit, time to tell you about what we do in our model. So our model starts with the parent, because we know that the education level, as the report shows, the education level of that parent is the single strongest indicator of the future academic success of the child, which often turns into the future success of the child. So NCFL does not approach our partners with a curriculum. We walk with them to find what will work best to engage parents as they work to meet their goals, to support their family, to bring their family out of poverty, as well as to reach the goals that they have in life as employees and as parents. Part of that does include classes like here at the Urban League, ESL classes in the community, technology certifications, but we don't stop there. What's really powerful about the NCFL model is that this is a 2-generation model. We bring parents and children together for learning opportunities. And this is critical through intentional parent-child interactions and now direct service to the community. Families engage with each other in ways they never did before, in ways that parents were never engaged with as children. And they engage with their community, certainly in ways that they may never have imagined possible. This is the exciting work that we get to do, because when we go beyond lifting up a parent or educating a child so they can move the next generation on, and we help to facilitate that intergenerational transfer of knowledge, that's the opportunity to break the cycle of poverty. In addition to that, we look for the opportunity for what we call compounding change. You may have contributed gloves or hats to a drive here in the community. You may have talked with families who are looking as part of service projects to address the real violence concerns that affect them in their communities. This is their opportunity to pull you in as members of their community beyond those small communities they have in each of our programs. When we look beyond these individual programs, we take a look and we see that multidimensional poverty and multi-generational poverty have a huge overlap. Our partners in the area can't do this work alone, and they don't. They engage others of you to help provide wraparound services that are critical to families living in poverty, because an education solution is not enough on its own if there's not a health solution there with it, if there's not housing opportunity with it. So this wraparound opportunity is what we are really looking to help our partners and those of you in the room engage in together. Our bold vision for Louisville, when we decided to go deeper in our community, is to stop having our programs work to help families navigate systems. We want to help the systems navigate the families and push them through. Thank you.
Hi, I am Beth Robinson-Kinney. I'm the legal director of Doctors and Lawyers for Kids. They asked me to speak today because we are one of the 2 grant recipients for the Health Equity Fund, which we're really excited about. Doctors and Lawyers for Kids is a medical legal partnership, and it is a partnership between Legal Aid Society, the Louisville Bar the Louisville Bar Association, U of L Pediatrics, and the Family Health Centers. And our goal is to connect the medical and legal professions to work to help families get out of poverty. We take a number of different civil legal cases, including family law, housing cases, expungement, education, immigration, and a couple other, I'm missing a few categories here, government benefits, for folks who are 200% below the poverty line. And unfortunately, in our city, we do have a lot of folks who are below 200% of the poverty line. We see a lot of different types of cases, but our goal is a little different than some other law firms in the city, because we're trying to practice preventative law the same way that the doctors practice preventative health care. In a typical situation, if you have a family and the furnace breaks down and there's mold in the apartment, they report it to their landlord. Their child is getting sick as this is going on. The landlord doesn't fix it, maybe. They get frustrated. They do the only thing that's in their power to do, which is they withhold their rent. Then they start getting threats, and they get a 7-day notice, and then they maybe go seek an attorney. Our goal is to, maybe when that child comes into the doctor's office, the pediatrician says, hey, what's going on with this breathing problem? They start talking about the housing situation. They say, we have this lawyer who's actually in this doctor's office right now. Do you want to just chat with her to see what's going on? And then maybe we have a conversation with them where we're able to intervene, and they never withhold their rent, and they don't get that 7-day notice, and they don't get evicted. So, that's one example of what we're doing. Specifically with the Health Equity Fund grant, what we're hoping to do is actually work on more education cases, because we do have a lot of low-income families who have children who have special needs, and they're in their classrooms, and maybe they need an IEP and they don't have one. Maybe they have an IEP and it doesn't quite fit their needs, and the parents get lost pretty early in the process, typically, and then they feel like they're not being listened to. They get frustrated, and then nothing gets done. It basically turns into a gridlock. Unlike other areas of law in the city, we don't have a ton of practitioners in that area. There's a real need, and there's just not a lot of legal expertise to provide to folks, especially free legal expertise. So that's what we're hoping to do with this grant, and that's the work that we're trying to do. The way that our model is set up, we have doctors who are in the family health centers, who are in U of L Pediatrics, who are in Norton Children's Hospital, and actually the social workers there are wonderful as well. And they contact us. They have contact with these people and say, can I send them your way? It seems like there might be a legal issue here. And because they do get trained in how to identify some of those legal issues, they send them our way. We do get to catch those problems early on before it really escalates into a crisis. That is pretty much what I have.
Hi, everybody. I am Sadiqa Reynolds. I'm the president and CEO of the Louisville Urban League, and I am so excited that Ben and the Greater Louisville Project choose each year to do this over here at the Urban League. It's really exciting. And actually, this room really does stay packed. We have, this is a building full of energy. So much really, really good work is happening here because of phenomenal partners, also a wonderful team that we have here at the league, but also really, really wonderful community partners that you heard from today, and others of you that are there in the audience. And so I am very, very thankful to live in a community with the Greater Louisville Project, with this sort of data. And let me be clear, we use this data every day, all the time. We also use it at our annual luncheon. We collaborate and work with GLP to make sure that we're getting our numbers right, because we're seeing it every single day on the front lines with the folks that we serve. I just want to make sure I don't go over. We're seeing it every day with the folks that we serve. So I'll do what others have done and talk a little bit about the Urban League, but also why this is so important, I think, for this community. And I don't think I can really say enough to you all about the importance of this data, about you really learning it and reading it and understanding it, because we have some real systems problems in our community, and the mayor is correct that they run throughout our entire country. But we are here, and we can fix this. These are things that we can do if and when we decide to have the will to do it. And I agree with whoever said that if they win, we will all lose. And that is a challenge for this community. We have got to do something different, and we have to begin doing it very quickly. And I think we can be intentional about the work that we do. And so I appreciate Jeff saying at the top of this that as we think about funding sources, we're going to be thinking about what does the work that you do help, how does it help to move the needle on what GLP has identified? And so those are the questions that we have to ask ourselves, I think, as we even continue to exist in this space. What are we doing and how are we doing it? So from the Urban League side, we focus on jobs, justice, education, health, and housing. On the job side, last year we put 251 people into employment. And I said this at a meeting this morning, I can't say it enough. We did that with our hands tied behind our backs. It was so difficult. If you think about the time that it took us to work with employers locally and to try to get people placed, because when you hear the unemployment numbers that you have heard, that is citywide, that is not West Louisville numbers. And people who are left unemployed at this point have tremendous barriers that every day our folks are working on. So our health navigators are trying to help people. Yesterday I talked to a woman who came in and she needed a kidney transplant. She was afraid she was actually going to lose her home. So we had to work with her, to work with the bank, to get things deferred so that she could relax and go through it. Yesterday, she came home from the hospital after having a kidney transplant. That is the work that we do every single day. I've told you before about the gentleman who had one leg already amputated, didn't want to have the other one amputated, but was afraid of the relationship with the doctor. We go in and navigate that. On any given day, somebody here might be, unbeknownst to me, I don't ever find out till later, driving somebody to Walmart for a job interview. Those are the things that we are doing every single day. Much of what you're talking about is every single day dealing with that child who maybe has had a parent who has committed suicide, maybe has been abused. We are taking people as they are and trying to get them placed. So whether it's expungements, how do we do that? How do we clear your record so that you can walk in for a job as a man or as a woman with dignity? The challenge of the job force is, honestly, you guys, we are training people who, after a 7-week training program, have to know they've got a job waiting for them at the other end. It shouldn't still be hard. There should be a pipeline that is ready. So this data matters, and for us to be able to do it, we are going to have to come together. But let me say this. There are 3, I tore my book up, and I'll get another one. But here's what, and I love every bit of it, but I have some time limit that I'm going to try to, it's not going to happen. The effect, you've written this here, the effects of multidimensional poverty do not just add up, they compound. Each additional disadvantage that a person experiences multiplies their barriers to success and well-being. Second point. Poverty is everything that makes it more difficult for individuals and communities to thrive. Its effects are felt not only in the wallet, but in every barrier to health and well-being. And then the last one that I thought was tremendously important, and it is the thing that we don't talk enough about, and when we do talk about it, we come up with no real solution. Louisville's history of institutional racism and segregation has had and continues to have a significant impact on its multidimensionally poor neighborhoods and the populations concentrated within them. While this report highlights the extent of the disparities across factors like income, health, insurance, and educational attainment, it does not discuss the mechanisms behind these disparities. And that's what we've got to begin to talk about. If you identify redlining, if you understand that the educational system, we're talking about middle-class black kids, comparing them to white kids, not reading on the same level. So it's not just about poor black kids. We have to deal with institutional racism and what has happened here. I would submit to you that all of these things that we hear about development happening in West Louisville, on the other side of that development, there is no black ownership planned. We have not had any ability to build and own wealth and pass it down to our children in this community. That is a challenge. That is why you have poverty generation after generation, because there are a whole group of people in this city that were not allowed to accumulate wealth. So how do we respond to that as a city? I am excited about Passport and the why, but who will own those spaces when they are done? That is the question. As we redevelop housing and we think about affordable housing, who will own those houses when it is over? How do we develop wealth? How do our children not live in constant poverty? How do we change educational outcomes? It's not through funding programs. We have got to get to the point where we are willing to challenge the system that we are existing in. That's what we must do. We must do that together, and we can do that. This city is big, but it is small enough that what they have identified is magical to me. We can do this together, but we have to know how, and we have to choose to move forward together. And so I would submit to you that I am very, very thankful to GLP for everything that they do, and every foundation and person who helped to support this work. This is big stuff. If we know it, we can change it. But we have to talk about wealth building. There is an answer to redlining. We have not been willing to give that answer. There is one. So the question becomes, what is the will of the people? And what some of those countries never had that this one did is slavery and Jim Crow. We cannot walk away from that. It would be wrong for me as a leader to allow my community to do that. And we have to address it. To hell with talking about it. How do we fix the issues? Who is going to own what we develop on the other side of 9th Street?
No better way to end than that. Thank you, Sadiqa. And I will tell you, just having struggled to find our original date and then having that canceled by snow, it is a testament to how busy this organization is that we had such a hard time finding a date after that. So thank you for letting us have this space, and thank you for all that you do and all that all of you do in this community to turn this data and the data that we have had before this into action. So giant round of applause for us. So I have two asks out of this. The first is that we collectively commit as a community of people in and out of this room to articulating in a confident and robust way. We will create a community in which everyone has the capacity to reach their full potential. We will do that. And we need to stop saying we could, we might, maybe, we should, it'd be great. We need to start saying, yes, that is the thing that we are going to do. And we also need to commit out of this to say that we will create a community in which every place that a person shows up in need, whether that is a need born of deprivation or aspiration. I would like to have my record expunged because I would like to have a better job. I am not showing up at school because there is instability in my household, wherever that is. Whether it is I am hungry for something that is physical, or I do not have a place that is stable to live, or I would like to better myself, we commit as a community to say robustly, yes, we will create the resources around you to make that possible for you. We need to say that with confidence. That's one. Second thing, I know an alarming number of you. It is awesome that we can pack a room in the middle of a day with people who care about data and care about changing our community. But I already knew an alarming number of you, and I knew you cared about those things. What we need to do is take this message beyond this room. Whether that is in the form of this report or whether that is in the form of our passion for change, for systems change, we need to be communicating that to the people who aren't here, and not just our friends. We also need to be reaching across every kind of political and social divide to be talking with a united voice about the kind of community in which we want to live. Those are the two asks. Thank you all so much for being here, and for all the people who have helped contribute to building our community into what it is, and who will contribute to making it what we want it to be. Thank you.